Yo, welcome to the Truth is Stranger Than Fiction podcast. Tonight we're revisiting one of the most shocking interviews ever recorded on Coast to Coast AM. A guy called Art Bell. I think you'll probably know who that is. So our guest is Andrew Basiago, who claims that as a child he participated in a secret government program known as Project Pegasus. A project he says explored time travel, teleportation, and other highly classified technologies. These are the extraordinary claims that continue to divide the opinion today. This is Project Pegasus, Part 1. So let's begin.
All right. So we have another show for you tonight. It's going to be a good one. Andrew Basiago is here. Andrew is a lawyer from Washington State. He holds 6 academic qualifications, including degrees from UCLA and Cambridge. So
Start off with, he's got degrees. Clearly the guy is academically pretty smart. So that's always a good place to start with these types of stories. I am excited about this story. I've not fully listened to this. I come across it and I thought, this is something I need to share with you guys.
Was participant in 2 secret U.S. defense projects. In the early 1970s, he was a child participant in a DARPA project called Pegasus. That was the first U.S. time-space exploration program at the time of the emergence of time travel in the U.S. That's right, time travel in the U.S. defense technical community. In the early 80s, he was a young adult participant in the CIA's Mars Jump Room program, which used a revolutionary transport technology to put a human presence on the red planet. Today...
Yes, I've heard about this as well. I don't know if this was the same guy, but a guy who I listened to as a child as well, because there's something to do with children and being able to use these teleportation machines is what I got from it. But they were going through portals and going to Mars, which this day and age, do you know what? I don't find it too far-fetched with what's going on with the world from a technology point of view. So I think potentially CERN, I don't know what they're up to, but if we got to the point where we learned how to harness this type of power and portals, and we know and understand that quantum entanglement is a thing where one thing from over here can affect something over here, that to me sounds very scientifically like a portal, right? Because you can enter one place and come out the other place. And for me, I always go back to this on everything that I do, including over at the Red or Blue Pill. I always go back to the point where we're at a point where we are able to put chips in people's heads, which allows humans to control computers with their eyes, which means there's more to the human body being more like a computer system than we think. So I think there is technology which is logic to us. And I think time travel and portals could be genuine for entertainment reasons, obviously. And when I say this channel is called Truth is Stranger Than Fiction, if this is a true story, it's obviously not. It is for entertainment purpose only, and it is one guy's, real far-fetched story as we see it now. But I'm not saying it's true or false. I'm just having an open mind at what if, basically. I love the word what if because it opens it up for interpretation. But if it is, and time travel and portals are real, then what a crazy world we live in. And I just imagine if this was disclosed along with aliens. I watched Disclosure Day, by the way. And humans... No, I'm not going to spoil it for you.
Andy is waging a truth campaign to reveal his experiences in these programs to all of us so humanity can understand the true extent of technical development on our planet and the true history of our activities in outer space. On tonight's show, we, however, will focus on Andy's experiences in the DARPA project, the project called Pegasus. Andrew, welcome to the program.
Howdy, Art. It's good to be on with you after all these years. I think I've probably waited 15 years because I've got some critical information for you about time travel and, in fact,
a quantum bombshell. Here we go. Quantum computers, right? They solve things which would take normal computers billions of years, apparently. So we're talking about stuff we have no idea the capabilities of it. But if I was to say anything that we understand has got anything to do with time travel and portals, that
drop tonight that I've been saving for you as a gift, really, for all the great reporting you've done over the years on time travel.
A quantum bombshell. And you mentioned this to me before without telling me what it was, so I have no idea what it is. And you say you're going to drop this quantum bombshell probably at the beginning of the third hour.
I think that would be best, just so it doesn't overshadow the interview. But
me too. Listen, you got to make people wait. That's what you do. Anyway, it is good to have you, and I'm glad that you have, through the years, listened on and off. That's great. So, I don't know, let us begin at the beginning. You've got quite an extensive education, and you've got pretty good qualifications, so I can imagine that you somehow were involved in these projects, but it actually began for you, I think, when you were very young. So if you can, describe what DARPA's Project Pegasus was and how you became involved.
DARPA was a classified defense-related research and development project under the Department of Defense. Specifically, the coordinating agency was DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Mm-hmm. But there was multi-agency development, and the primary defense contractor involved from the private sector was the Ralph M. Parsons Company, one of the world's leading engineering firms. Okay. And it cast an umbrella. It was an umbrella agency, but it cast a kind of a net into which they were putting anything and everything.
It's funny how he says an umbrella, because it does sound a little bit like the Umbrella Academy, if anybody's watched that. Very similar parallels with the time travel and that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
We have another show for you tonight. It's going to be
Projects Agency. Mm-hmm. But there was multi-agency development, and the primary defense contractor involved from the private sector was the Ralph M. Parsons Company, one of the world's leading engineering firms. Okay. And it cast an umbrella. It was an umbrella agency, but it cast a net into which they were putting anything and everything that would yield a time-space exploration capability. And by 1970, they had already reduced to practice, essentially.
Can you imagine where we're at now? If this is a true story, 1970, we're talking, of when they are going through portals, time travel. Is this human technology that's always been around here? That's my question. Is it? Because if it is, then there's probably humans that have been here thousands of years then that have this technology and have control of humanity, maybe. Or is this technology that has been given from a different civilization? Both options blow my mind. And there are probably more options. Let me know what you think. How this would be that in 1970, time travel and portals are a thing, and in 2026 nobody knows about it, if that's true. Then the only inkling that we've got is potentially we know about CERN, that has the God particle and probably the potential to do some crazy stuff, which would give us the Mandela effects in the timeline shifts and all the weird stuff that goes on with the human resonance and all that stuff. You know what I mean?
What could broadly be categorized as or classified as time travel, from psychic time travel involving conventional remote viewing, mm-hmm. all the way into different forms of physical time travel. So I want to be perfectly clear that I'm not sharing a tall tale. I'm actually revealing something very significant, which is the true history of the development of time travel within the U.S. defense technical community. That's the historical context in which time travel actually emerged.
And by the way, I just really want to say this and get this out so people understand. You were to be on the show 2 days ago, but I really want the audience to understand the truth. We tried to connect with you on Skype. And of course, as you know, we had a big bad. And secondary to that, there was the possibility of a cell phone, which of course is not going to fly for a 3-hour interview. And beyond that, I think you had a landline with a portable phone that battery was dead. So we didn't have any choice. People think that we did this on purpose. Some people, I think that, Andy. And so I just want you to verify for everybody that is exactly what happened.
Right. I think something about the momentousness of tonight's discussion between the two of us maybe was throwing some of that energy backward in time and sort of circumvented the technical infrastructure we needed to do a great interview tonight. So I'm glad that we did postpone and reschedule for tonight.
So what actually happened is you went out and bought a landline phone, plugged it into the wall, and that's how you and I are talking right now.
Correct.
All right. So they had all those modalities for looking into time travel. Now, what DARPA does is, in fact, look into these weird, edgy things. That's what DARPA is all about.
Right. DARPA's legislative mandate from the United States Congress is to prevent military surprise. So ultimately, or initially, I should say, the time travel project began after the famous July 1952 overflight of our nation's capital by 9 extraterrestrial craft that were clocked at Langley Air Force Base at traveling at 7,000 miles per hour, which exceeded our flight capabilities, our jet aircraft capabilities of that time.
Sure.
But those extraterrestrial crafts, now this sighting was reported on the front page of the Washington Post.
Oh, actually, people can go back and you can get a front page picture of the Post and you can see these UFOs, whatever they are, just as you described.
Well, okay, that's massive confirmation then that there is actual evidence of what Andrew is explaining in the newspaper about the UFOs, which is crazy. And that just, so the UFOs that we're talking about, I can only just start thinking about the missing scientists and Amy Estridge talking about the P-47s and the P-52s that are from the future. It's us from the future, which are these alien looking things. And they're coming back. So are we talking that they've come through time travel, crashed, and we've been able to get hold of this technology? And then that is why and how we have reverse engineered and messing with all this stuff, which is then messing with our past, present, and future, maybe. Because there's a lot of weird stuff going on for sure, you know? Anybody's watched Disclosure Day, then you will know as well about Disclosure Day. It happens right at the end.
It's a fact.
Right. And what they were also seen doing was disappearing in one location in the sky and then reappearing elsewhere. And we concluded that our extraterrestrial visitors were in possession of time travel, basically of teleportation. So my father, Raymond F. Basiago, had been working at Okanite Company in Paramus, New Jersey. And in October of 1952, a U.S. Air Force colonel showed up at his desk at Okanite and ordered him to report the next Monday to the Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Wood Ridge, New Jersey, where my dad designed the metal alloy by which the ramjet plane would not melt from friction in our atmosphere as a result of contact with molecules of air, and would also not melt when it went outside of our atmosphere from friction with space dust, because the goal of the ramjet project was to essentially chase these extraterrestrial craft away from Earth. And that was my father's entry essentially into the classified defense-related research realm, the Black Project realm.
And at this point, how you?
Well, in the 50s, I had not yet been born. I was born on September 18th of 1961 as the youngest of 5 children. So my father.
Okay, so if we're in a basing these UFOs out, you have to believe that there is something more controlling Earth that is fighting these very advanced civilizations that are able to go through portals in time. The people who are hidden in plain sight, maybe, who have all the technology that seems to be rolling out now, not us as in, the human race. Pretty basic, you know what I mean? So I wonder who is here. I mean, is it a reptilian race? Is it humans that have very sophisticated technology that are living and controlling Earth, but don't show themselves? I don't know. It's interesting, though.
Married in 1955 after 3 years at Curtiss-Wright. And then a very creative period of his career that's essential to understanding how Project Pegasus fell together. He was working from 1956 to 64 after leaving Curtiss-Wright. He was working at the Thomas A. Edison Research Laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey. Now, this was not the historical Edison labs. It was a kind of a think tank that was P. Williams.
I have to say, straight out the bat, just listening to this, and I don't really know too much. Clips on TikTok of this guy, but very small. I've not sat down and listened to a full interview. By the way, this interview happened in 2015, so it's not that old. I didn't realize Art Bell was his show and did this in 2015. It's only 11 years old that we're getting this story from, but obviously he's been around a lot longer, and I've seen bits and bobs, but the story that he's saying, the information he's bringing up seems like he's bringing up information which how you would read that is, I don't know, maybe by being an actor, but it just feels real, you know, like doesn't feel made up, you know, but I'm expert in this stuff. Don't take my word for it.
Essentially his supervisor and his co-inventor of electronic patents of that era. And it was a very prestigious think tank. For example, 2 desks over from my dad was J.B. Johnson, who essentially made the timeline of key discoveries in 20th century physics by discovering signal-to-ground noise, basically Johnson, what we call white noise, in 1928. Foster C. Nix, the prominent solid-state physicist, was also in this small lab in West Orange. And much of what my dad did were higher-end math problems that were a result of the development of different electronic components that were then being developed by that particular think tank, primarily staffed with electrical engineers. But then at some point, he was asked by the United States government to repeat Nikola Tesla's teleportation that Tesla had been tinkering with since his famous stay in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1899. That was, in fact, the beginning of what would become Project.
I was literally just thinking in my head, like, I wonder how this links up with Nikola Tesla and Trump's uncle and his time travel marvelous grounds of the marvelous, what's the book called? Marvelous Underground Journeys or something. And it's Baron Trump and the last president. And it's obviously Donald Trump. Like, I wonder how this all lines up. And he's just mentioned him.
Pegasus.
All right. Well, you're something I didn't know. I had no idea Tesla had been tinkering with teleportation.
In fact, there were 3 individuals on what would become Project Pegasus when I began serving in the late 60s and early 70s who affirmed the debt of gratitude that Project Pegasus owed Tesla. They were my late father, who certainly knew as essentially the point man between Parsons and the CIA on the theory and practice of Tesla teleportation because he had mastered all that at the Edison labs between 56 and 64. That was also confirmed by Jack Pruitt, who served as a team leader on Project Pegasus, and according to Nichols and Moon, I think it's quite probable or quite believable, served as the research director for Project Montauk later in the early 80s. And the debt owed Tesla was also affirmed by a very distinguished member of Pegasus, and that was Dr. Robert Beckwith, who would go on to earn perhaps 20 patents, U.S. patents on some of the most advanced electronic, would be bought up by Robert Noyce and would become what we now call Intel Corporation.
All right. So, Andy, you're describing this, aren't you, as the real Philadelphia experiment?
Right. I want to make it completely clear. And also, I want my critics to know that I'm sharing this information because I felt that I was under a moral duty to do so. When I look back around 2000, at that point being a fan of the Art Bell Show for, I think, 12 years, I think since the late 80s, I went to the different time travel guests and think about what I had been part of. And I thought, my God, my status would be sort of like having been an office boy for the Wright flight. I mean, I have the inside account. This was the project. Time travel was actually developed. Now, there was a Philadelphia experiment, but the one that we know is a cover story that was scripted by the Office of Naval Intelligence to de-link the 3 critical connections between the 3 elements, namely Tesla, teleportation, and the Los Alamos physicist. What would become Pegasus and the real Philadelphia experiment was the secret twin of Project Manhattan, the atomic bomb project. And some of the same individuals who worked on the bomb were quietly working with time travel for 25 years, so that by the time I entered Pegasus as a child participant in the winter of 1968, Tesla teleportation of human beings through vortal tunnels in time-space had been successfully reduced to practice.
Okay. I have one slight worry with this story, and that is he has been a fan of Art Bell's for 12 years. I'm just wondering if you've gone through or have all this knowledge already, if you would want to listen to the stories, because if you already know it's true, would you still have that motivation of trying to find out? For me, curiosity is because I don't know, and I want to know, and that's why I continue to listen and watch and try and work it out. But when I go through my journey of everything, once I've gone through that journey, it's very hard for me to go back and watch what it was when I first started out of, oh, well, I think it's this. Once I've closed that book and I've moved on. So it's very difficult if I'd been in a time traveling program doing portals to then go and listen to, stories on YouTube, but back then it would Art Bell radio station. So that is one red flag. Doesn't mean he's telling he's lying or telling the truth. It's one thing I am. But other than that, he's very good with all the information. It's believable.
Question for you. I, of course, had a number of interviews with regard to the Philadelphia, and some of the technical details were revealed. And I'm recalling rotating magnetic fields and all the rest of it. And it, frankly, Andy, sound an awful lot like the same kind of technology that one might imagine could be applied to travel in time.
Yes, but the story that has been propagated is a cover story. There were critical differences in terms of what really happened. And our informant on this was somebody who was telling this story when I was a child on Project Pegasus in 4 interviews, 2 conducted by myself, 1 conducted by the writer Alexandra Bruce, and 1 conducted by Ken Thomas, the great crusading journalist at Steam Shovel Press. Over 25 years at that point, really ultimately to the early 2010s, to the time that Beckwith was now shortly before his death, he affirmed the same information, which is that the actual Philadelphia experiment did not take place in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. It took place in Long Island Sound. It did not involve the Eldridge, and it involved a ship called the Martha's Vineyard. Okay. It was not an experiment into radar invisibility of the Eldridge. It was an experiment into Tesla teleportation of the Martha's Vineyard after the Nazi Navy began chaining ordnance to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and presenting a military threat to our ships at sea. It did not result in multiple sailors being fused in the deck of the Eldridge. It involved the death of 1 sailor who, when the ship went back not to Norfolk, Virginia, but to Newport News, Virginia, was falling through time-space and was impaled on a column that supported the splash cowling of the Martha's Vineyard. And here's the critical connection. Inside the captain's mast of that ship, the Martha's Vineyard, was not Albert Einstein, as some have speculated, and was not John von Neumann, as was part of the cover story that was propagated, but were the Manhattan Project physicists J. Robert Oppenheimer and Dr. Edward Teller. And I can say that I met the latter during my childhood experiences in Project Pegasus. So we've gotten the gist of the fact that there was an important time travel experiment, or an experiment that accidentally yielded a teleportation capability. But it is a false story. It is naval disinformation. The actual Philadelphia experiment is such as I just described.
I mean, to keep this story up, you've got to be very good. If it is a story, very good, because that's very specific, and he's changing things which you could slip up very easily. And I'm not going to lie, I've not looked into whether he slipped up at all, but the story is very specific. You know what I mean? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts on this, peeps. I'm very interested.
No, that particular information was it was the content of frequent soliloquies delivered by Dr. Robert Beckwith at Albuquerque when we were sharing a meal with our colleagues on Project Pegasus. Individuals like the science director of the project, Dr. Harold Agnew, when he was the director of Los Alamos National Labs. Teller was sometimes at lunch. I remember several lunches that Dr. Ivan Browning attended when he was the director of science and technology for CIA. Beckwith was obsessed regarding the real Philadelphia experiment, and he was constantly correcting those present so that had the critical facts of what had happened and a critical debt of gratitude that Pegasus owed Tesla.
All right, hold it right there. Yes, I can fully understand that, and I can understand an obsession with it well. My guest is Andy Basiago, and boy, you're getting quite a story tonight from the high desert. This is Midnight in the Desert.
The night can be explored.
On a personal note, do you know what gets me? I think about is we have, and I'm I suppose this sounds very paranoid, but I always look around. Like I would say, I'm in like this 3D. I sort of view in the way that I'm always aware and looking around at my surroundings, and there's something that ain't quite right. And I mean, time travel is one thing that I would love to see potentially who is a time traveler my path and give me some information, like to have that interaction. That would be really cool. Do you know what I mean? I'm always looking around because I know this world ain't quite right, and I know it, and I'm very vigilant. Haven't come across anything yet, but you do come across people and they just say some stuff, and that's weird. Has anyone had that kind of experience where they feel like somebody's just popped into their life, give them some information, and pop back out, and you think that's very strange? If you have, let me know in the comments.
And he's a very well-educated man, and laying this all out very carefully. He says, what we know, or think we know, about the Philadelphia experiment is not accurate. I listened years ago to Al Bielek describe technical details of the Philadelphia experiment, which you now say was kind of cover for what was really going on. Is that fair?
Yes, it's a cover story. It involved another ship, another technical process, but the critical thing they were concealing was the linkage between Tesla teleportation and the very Los Alamos physicists that developed the atomic bomb and continued to design more destructive nuclear weapons, in the latter half of the 20th century.
Oh, yes. Okay, modalities.
Correct.
Is there a way to go through?
Especially if we conceive of it as a spectrum with, let's say, psychic time travel on the left, and then what I call physio-virtual kinds of time travel in the middle, and then into the physical forms of time travel. On the left side of the spectrum, the sort of the side of the spectrum,
right,
we have psychic form of conventional remote viewing.
Okay.
I have historical record on that. Ingo Swann often claimed that remote viewing the SRI in 1972.
Right.
However, I and my childhood colleagues, I like to say that we were small mediums at large. We were doing conventional remote viewing for the Office of Naval Intelligence no later than the fall of 1969. And in fact, we were tasked, and it makes sense why we were, because John McCain's father was then the commander of the entire Pacific Fleet of the United States Navy. We were asked to determine whether Lieutenant Commander McCain was in the POW compound known as the Hanoi Hilton,
right,
and if so, where he was in the building. I imagine they either wanted to bomb his location or maybe extricate him from that location.
Okay, that's very typical target for remote viewing.
Right. We were doing conventional remote viewing for the Navy. Then they began manipulating our environment, or at least our perception. One of the things they were doing was spinning us, and by spinning us, inducing out-of-body experiences. During one of those OBEs, I came to a mechanical limit beyond which my consciousness could not go any farther. When I described that machine or that limit this was a quote from the lady from DARPA who was debriefing me. She said, "Others have described it. We think it's the technical infrastructure that's propagating the hologram that we find ourselves in. We're calling it the Matrix." And this was upon me returning to my body from an induced OBE, induced by being physically spun clockwise on my back beneath a spiral image on the ceiling at 33 rotations per minute, which is certainly a curious number. Into the recording industry with the 33 RPM records, but we not only were going out of
33, huge number, right? Seems to be attached to everything.
I reached the physical limit of those OBEs one time. That's what the debriefing lady from DARPA said. And this was, 29 years before the production and release Matrix trilogy,
right,
by the
Right. I can clearly see how the spinning you talked about, the physical spinning, could lead to an altered state, I guess.
Yes, and that was what I call astral time travel. They deracinated our almost in a shamanic way, a very tribal way, and we left our bodies and went elsewhere, and then we were questioned about where we went.
Got it.
So that, again, is very fuzzy logic time travel.
All right, we have a long way to go to get to 8 modalities here.
Okay. Now, then in fall of 70, Well, in actually started some of the physical time travel first. Let me stick in, within the logic of the spectrum.
Sure.
Okay, then in fall, they took us General Manufacturing Company, the map making of Standard Oil, which was still was until very recently, in Convent Station, New Jersey. And there they had a device called a chronovisor. Is an electro-optical device that propagates a hologram that is so dense that effect of lensing a non-local event into the laboratory, an event from what we would call the past or the future. If you stand away from the hologram, you can see something going on inside this cubical field of light generated from a crystal array in the ceiling that has either happened in the past on some timeline or has happened in the future on some
Oh, wow. This is going to get crazy, people. We're on about the chronovisor now. Timelines. This story's got everything. Unfortunately, it is the end of this episode. I'm going to do this as a series. I just want to put it out there to see how people react. Let me know if you like it. If you do, I'm going to do the full series. I think it's about 2.5 hours long in full, 20 minutes of it. So if you want more, you want a part 2, then please give us a like, hype, subscribe, let me know. And we'll get a part 2, 3, 4, and 5, hopefully. All going well. But yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you again, hopefully tomorrow for a part 2. If not, over the weekend. But yeah, enjoy yourself. Make sure to have a good morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. See you later.